Well, I think we can get started. Looks like it started to slow down a little bit. Thank you everyone for coming to our newest cup for the Cup of Data. Our speaker today, Elena Migunova, is a user experience principal from the Tableau CRM user experience team. Today, she's going to show you how you can make your dashboards more targeted and stunning. And she'll even share some workshop templates you can leverage every time you start a new analytics project. Take it away, Elena.
Awesome. Thanks, Yuzak. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our UX design session. And before we start, let's get over our forward-looking statement. So basically, this is to remind you that Salesforce is a publicly traded company. So please make any purchasing decisions based on what's available in a product currently today. All right, now that we got over it, I mentioned a lot of design thinking and best practices, and it's going to be a design session. And by the end of the session, we're all going to become design heroes. Now, what does it take to be a design hero? And I'll share a story with you to give you an example. Now, once upon a time, there was a company by the name Airbnb that you may have heard of. And in the early days, they weren't looking that great. Their earnings were really not doing that great. People weren't really signing up and renting apartments with Airbnb. So the founders were kind of a bit clueless of what was going on because there was a lot of interest, a lot of people signed up to be hosts, and it wasn't clear right away what's going on and why are they only making $100 a week, which is not looking great. So then one of the founders decided to just log into the app and be a user and see what they see. And what they saw was shocking. It was terrifying. They just saw horrible, horrible pictures of people's apartment rentals. They were blurry and not clear how the rental actually looks like. They were not inviting you to rent them at all. So here it was. They discovered a problem right away. And the solution that they came up with was pretty creative. They just decided that they need to hire professional photographers, go out and take pictures of people, places, to make those appealing pictures, inviting the users to sign up and rent a vacation rental. So here was the design hero in action. They empathized with the user, they discovered a problem, and they found a creative solution. Now, anybody really can be a design hero. You don't have to be an Airbnb founder. You can just be a cat. And whenever your owner buys you a really weird toy that you don't really know what to do, you just want to hide in a cozy spot, just use a box and be a design hero for yourself and design yourself a toy that you would like to be using. So today we're all going to become design heroes, and I'll guide you through this journey. Now, design thinking and best practices don't come for free. Definitely, it's a time commitment. It's an investment to bring your team on board, to educate yourself. So why is it important to make this investment? Now, I'll share a few points with you. First of all, you will be able to reduce the development costs. And one of the studies showed that code defects are up to 30 times more expensive to fix that rather than using the right information in the first place. How it translates to analytics when you don't have the right requirements from the beginning, when you don't understand what your user needs, you end up creating this overly complicated data recipes that don't need to be complicated. You end up creating extra data flows and data sets that you will never use because you didn't know that your user won't need this information. Now, design thinking is a collaborative process. So the whole team is invited to participate. Everybody who will be using your dashboards, who will be monitoring you, building those dashboards and giving you feedback, they're all invited to be part of this process. And when you invite your team to be part of this process, you really get more visibility and they're more excited. They feel like they're part of your project, and that way they become your champions and the adoption of your product is really great. Finally, last but not least, just products that are greatly designed. They're easy to use and the productivity really grows. Your users are more productive, and again, your company is more productive, so everybody wins. So this is why you should invest in design thinking, and hopefully I get your attention for the rest of this hour now. All right. Now, before we begin our design hero design thinking journey, I invite you to close your eyes and picture a dashboard. What does it look like? What comes to mind? Now you can open your eyes and see, does it look familiar? Did anybody see this kind of dashboard? Probably, it looks very familiar, sadly. Now, what's wrong with this dashboard? Well, your user is completely lost. They don't know what to look at just because there's so much information, and this is great data to display, but there's just a lot of it and it's not structured. So that's a really common mistake of building dashboards, just trying to put everything together at the same time. What's wrong with this dashboard? Well, it's often perceived as a static document just because users don't know what to do with it. It has a dense grid. Everything is put together. It has a huge information overload just because, again, everything is presented to you at the same time on the same page. It's inactionable just because you're lost. You don't know what to do here. What's the main part? What's the secondary part? That's why it's often dropped into folders and forgotten. So all work was for nothing just because it's unusable. Now let's picture something different. Picture an app, maybe this Airbnb app that I mentioned earlier, or one of your favorite apps that you use to work out or listen to music. How is this experience different? Well, this experience is often dynamic and layered, meaning that it doesn't present you all the functionality at the same time. It's task focused and oriented. Basically, what it means is every screen of this app is targeted to serve a certain purpose and deliver on a certain task. It's device appropriate, so it doesn't matter if you access it on your phone, your iPad, or your laptop. The experience will be optimized and it'll be easy to use. It's actionable, meaning that you are able to achieve your goal, whatever it is you are doing on this app, easily without being lost. It's designed and not authored, meaning that it always keeps the user's needs in mind. It's updated regularly as well. Basically, you're updating the app regularly based on your user's needs, maybe some new needs that you discover and the new technologies that become available or new data that becomes available. So I invite you to think analytic apps and not dashboards, and bring this great experience that you experience with the everyday apps to your dashboards and analytics products. What does this experience look like? Well, let's take a look at one of the examples, our sales dashboard template. It doesn't even look like a dashboard, just looks like a regular web page that you can navigate through and get some idea of the most important KPIs. So it's very different from that first dashboard that I showed you. Or this dashboard, for example, it's very well structured. It's clear right away what kind of story it's trying to tell me. And I know how to scan the page and what's first important information, what's secondary. Or this example right here, it's very clear to me that there's more information I can access by clicking on this details button. So not everything presented to me at the same time. It's very inviting experience and very well designed. So how do we get there? Well, to begin our design journey, we need some inspiration, right? Where does it come from? Well, one famous American designer said that art makes questions, but design makes solutions. Now, I would add to that, that often design starts with a simple question of what if? And to give you an example, I'll bring an example of David Rockwell's, who is a famous architect, his book that he wrote on this concept of what ifing and putting together different mashups. So what is a mashup? It's a concept that of things that don't really go together, but you get inspired and think about what if I put those things together and create an architectural concept. Now, for those of you who've been to Las Vegas before, maybe you've seen this chandelier bar, and this is a product of this what if brainstorming, right? What if we put an entire bar in a chandelier? What would this experience look like? And as you can see, it looks very unusual. very cool. I haven't been there, but looks really cool. Would love to go and check it out. So basically what asking what if allows you to do is allows you to think bigger from the beginning and not limit yourself to the specific requirements that you're working with. What if each of your days, if each of your projects will start with what if? What if your sales team ran on only one KPI or was only allowed to use one app? How would you design this experience? What if we had insights in our boss's breakfast cereal? Now, obviously, we can't do that, unfortunately. But what if we could, or what if we could design an experience that will allow us to get closer to this idea? Now we feel more inspired, hopefully, but we need some design principles to guide us. Now, as Salesforce design team, we follow 4 core design principles of clarity, efficiency, consistency, and beauty. Clarity is really important because it's really important that your product is clear to the user. They understand the purpose of it, and they don't need to think twice, oh, what is it I need to do here? Now, next, your product needs to be efficient. So they need to be able to achieve their goals efficiently and don't spend extra time using your product, even if it's great. Consistency is really important because I'm sure there are existing patterns out there that are either exist in your product or in the industry in general. So it's really important to keep consistency in mind to create any new products that will use these familiar patterns and make it easier for your user to use your product. Now, last but not least, your product needs to be beautiful. Users are more and more demanding now. There are more and more apps that everybody is using, and they will compare your product to this favorite app that they use on their phone. And they will question, oh, why can't this experience be as great as my favorite app? So it's really important to consider beauty as well. Now I went through all those principles in a certain order. That's because that's the priority order. That's how you should prioritize each principle when designing your product. And here's an example when you don't really do that and you put one principle over another. Like in this example, consistency was put over clarity with this redesign project that you've probably, all of you have seen. Our user experience VP, JD, discovered this crazy redesign when it happened, and he wrote a really great tweet about it. It was really popular. So basically what it shows here, what happens when you put consistency over clarity. So now all these icons are really, really consistent, but it's not really clear which one is which anymore because they all have the same colors, it's a very similar shape. So it's really hard for me to distinguish now which one is which. Now, to make it even more fun, in analytics, we have a 5th principle of fluidity. And what it basically means is your dashboard needs to be a living and breathing product that is created with interactions in mind and responsiveness in mind. So each chart interacts with another chart and it creates this great experience that's really well received by the users. All right, now that we're inspired and we went through our guiding principles, we're ready to take an action and see how it is that we approach design thinking. Well, what would be a design presentation without a quote from Steve Jobs? And he once said that design is not just what it looks like and feels like, but it's about how it works. Now, how do you get there? How do you understand how your thing needs to work? Well, oftentimes what happens is our design thinking is not very deep. And when we start designing a product, we start thinking about the surface first, with colors and fonts and branding in mind. If we start thinking a little bit deeper, then we think about the structure of our page, the scope of the information that should be displayed there, and the flow, different interactions that will be present. But oftentimes what we miss is the biggest part and most important part, which is the purpose. What are the user intentions and goals for our product? This part is often missed, and that's how the design becomes really not very usable for our users. Let's see how do we get to the purpose. Well, when you design a dashboard, think about designing the information, a three-step iterative approach that starts with empathizing with your user and understanding their goals and needs, ideating on different solutions and brainstorming and being creative, to designing and testing the prototype that you put together based on your ideas. And it goes back to empathizing again, because once you build a product, a prototype, you would want to get feedback from your users, empathize with this feedback and ideate on the improvement ideas again. So that's how you design a great product. Now let's take a look at each of those steps more closely. It all starts with empathy, and empathy is a bedrock of good design. So in order to frame your understanding around the user, you need to gather information about their goals and information needs and what does success looks like for them. So how would you go about it? Well, usually it starts with just a simple question: who is it for? Who is it I am designing for? What are their what does success looks like for them? What are the tasks they're doing daily? Who is it? Because usually it's not you. So it's important to empathize. You will create a persona while thinking about who is it you're building for. And this will be a collaborative process. It's best actually when it's a collaborative process and you invite other team members, or maybe the personas itself will be actually using your dashboard to participate and share their ideas, because they're the best, they're your best friends here. Give your persona a real name. So everybody on the team, when you say Astro, they will know that you're talking about the sales manager. Document some high-level metrics about them, like their experience level or anything that might make sense for your particular use case. Think about what motivates them in their job. What is it that keeps them going? What is it that makes them successful? What are their expectations for your product? What are their expectations in their role? What is it that you need to provide to them? What are their current frustrations? What doesn't work in the current setup, or what's missing? And most importantly, think about what are their most important tasks that they work on day to day. What are their business goals? What will make them successful at the end of a day or a quarter? So once you capture all that information, it's time to start to gather their information needs. And you will have to step in your user's shoes, and you will be able to do it by following the activity of path of inquiry. Path of inquiry is basically just a structured outline of all the questions that your users will need to answer in order to be successful and achieve their task or goal. Now, it's again a collaborative process. You need to invite team members, you need to invite the end users and collaborate with them together to figure out all those questions. Now we define the user's goals as a part of this persona exercise. Now we need to list all the questions needed to answer their goal and to complete their task successfully. So you'll be brainstorming on the questions. Next, you'll be collaborating with your group and grouping similar questions together under themes, just because probably everybody will have something similar. And this is really important. This step will help us later on find out what structure our dashboard needs or our app needs. Next thing you will do is you'll prioritize the question with a group that you're working with by voting for the questions that resonate the most. Finally, only after doing all those steps and understanding the questions, you can start thinking about the metrics to better answer the question. Because what often happens is people skip through those first steps and they jump straight into metrics where they don't actually know what is it that their users are trying to find out from the dashboard. Finally, you can start thinking about identifying relevant business actions to include in your dashboard. What is it your user will want to do after looking at the dashboard? So at the end, by following this process, you really get a great outcome. You get a clear understanding of who will be consuming the information, a list of goals they're trying to achieve, a list of business actions they will want to take from this information, And most importantly, because you'll be collaborating with your team and stakeholders on this part, you will get alignment on the critical business questions before you actually develop anything. And this will save you so much time because you won't get any last minute requirements, or when everything is developed, it's, you find out that you didn't include the metrics that they were actually willing to see. So this part is really important here. All right, this is an example of how path of inquiry activity looked like before COVID. Everybody will just get in the same room and they will brainstorm and write down the questions on just the sticky notes. Those colored dots here that you see, those are the voting points. So everybody gets their dots and they vote for the questions that they think are the most important. So that's how everybody feels like they belong and they contribute to building the product. Those orange cards you see here, those are the themes that emerged from discussing all those questions. And we'll get back to those themes. They're really important for structuring your app, like I mentioned earlier. And as you can see, it's very low investment at that point. You haven't developed anything. It's really just brainstorming and collaborating with your peers. All right, now we understand our user needs, and maybe we should start thinking about functionality that we need to provide to our user. And for this, we often ask a question, what job is my product hired to do? And all true design-led innovation in companies, it's led by finding this sweet spot of being able to deliver on completing the job for the user in a cheaper, faster, more fun way. So an example would be, when you're looking to buy a skateboard, you're really looking for this fun experience of riding your board and doing some tricks. You're not actually looking for specific wheels or trucks, unless maybe you're like a super professional. So think about what is it that your product needs to deliver, what kind of job. This is a famous framework. It's been used for a while. It just answers a very simple question: what jobs are customers hiring your product to do for them? Right? In your case, it's a dashboard or analytics app. Jobs to be done have 4 common traits. They are customer-centric, so you shouldn't be coming up with them on your own. You should be talking to the users who will be using your product. They're solution agnostic, so at that point, you're just focusing on the job itself without bringing up a specific solution in mind. So for example, making a coffee would be a great job to take on, right? But making a coffee using a specific coffee machine, that would be different, and they won't be really solution agnostic anymore. Jobs are stable over time, so rarely customers' objectives really change drastically. So if you find yourself frequently changing the jobs for your product, then something's wrong. You may want to rethink this job that you're putting together. Jobs, most importantly, need to always have measurable outcomes, meaning that there's always a success criteria for the job. So again, for making a coffee, obviously the success criteria would be me enjoying my coffee. Right, and here's an example of how you want to go about capturing this job to be done. One of the methods, it's called the job stories method, and it centers around the situation that your user is in when they're completing the job and the motivation that they have to complete the job. And finally, it documents the expected outcome or the success criteria. So every time you will be looking at your product, you'll be going back and comparing it. Oh, okay, is it able to deliver on this job that I put together? And there might be many different jobs that you uncover. All right, now that's a lot of homework that we did already, but there's one more thing that's important to keep in mind. Where would actually our users access our analytics solution? Is a lot of times what we see is dashboard is a standalone tab that not everybody is able to access easily, or they need to switch back and forwards while they're working on their day-to-day job. So it's really important to follow your user and understand when and where they're likely to access your analytics product. And it's really important to understand where they are completing their tasks to present analytics at the right point in time to them. Now, when you think about it, always keep in mind that maybe they're in a different situation. There's a different use case. So think about, will they be using the whole dashboard and really inspecting very closely every chart and KPI? Or maybe they just need a little snippet at some point, and that will do the job for them at that point in time. Always think about being responsive and kind of thinking when you develop a dashboard that it's not always going to be a standalone tab. Maybe it's embedded. Maybe your user accesses it on their mobile device, an iPad or an iPhone. So always optimize for all those experiences. One way to capture and follow your user is put together a user journey map. So think of a scenario when your user is doing their job. What insights do they need to see and when? Which actions will they take? And most importantly, which Salesforce page they'll be looking at. So maybe, again, your dashboard just needs to be in this specific page rather than a standalone thing. Here's an example of a journey map. Here you can see that, our Astro, when he's looking at a home page, they just need to identify the focus area for the day. When they look at the record page, they need to figure out who to schedule a meeting with. And finally, when they're on their mobile device on the go, they probably just need to check their KPIs. So that would be a good example of a user journey. All right, there's a video that we've put together for you. There's a link to it. Don't worry, you'll get a copy of this deck. You'll be able to follow this link and take a look at some of the examples of the embedded dashboards, as well as some of the cool, inspiring designs for mobile dashboards. So please take a look after the presentation. All right, now that we've gathered all this information, it's time for my most important part, the ideation and generating ideas, collaborating together again. So ideation always centers around sharing your ideas. And now that we have a good understanding of all our users' information needs and their goals, it's time to really start brainstorming what is it that we need to build. And at this point, again, we're not actually developing anything. We're still collaborating with the team. And all the materials that are needed are just some paper and markers to make sketches. And most importantly, keeping an open mind and being ready to ask this what if question and brainstorm. So ideating usually happens in the form of a design studio. And what a design studio is just a meeting where you collaborate with a team and you sketch out your ideas. So you start by a round of time-boxed sketching where you just look back into those most important questions that your user is asking and start sketching the solution to answer those questions. Now everybody will get a chance to present their sketches to the group, and the group will vote and prioritize each question, each sketch, just like you did with the questions earlier. And finally, again, all the sketches will be sorted and grouped under themes, again, just like you did in the path of inquiry. So again, it's a very collaborative process. Now I mentioned sketching. I mean, it might sound crazy if you're not an artist or designer, but artists are not required at all. Like you can see in these examples from our past design studios, if you can draw a line, a box, you're good. Everybody can do it. It's all about iterative and generative process. So there is no right or wrongs at this point. You're just really sharing ideas with a group, and that's what it's all about generating as many ideas as possible. And last but not least, it's about inspiring each other and sharing different points of view and bringing everybody on the same page. Very beneficial to do this step before developing your product. All right, now that you've done a round of sketching, you have an understanding of what your user needs are. It's time to step into a design phase and designing the actual product. Now, designing information or analytic app always starts with organization. So always think about information architecture first, and that will predicate the form and function of your product. Let's take a look this example of an app structure. Now, remember, we talked about passive inquiry and grouping questions and themes. Now, that's where you will use those themes. So each theme will represent a dashboard. So for example, we figured out that we need an overview page, and we need some more specific pages. On the performance page, I want to see how much have I closed this quarter. And this will be a whole dashboard just dedicated to answering this question. Right, so this will keep your things nice and clean, and your user won't be overwhelmed with information right away. Now, okay, we figured out our app structure, but now we need to look closer at each of the pages structure. So what's important to keep in mind when you're looking at the page structure? Well, everybody is familiar with, reading things and reading newspapers or web articles or books. So let's take inspiration from there and take a look at this newspaper, right? Everything has a headline that you're reading, right? So it's usually at the top, it's the biggest thing ever, and that's what drags your attention. So always reserve the top of your page or your dashboard to display the information that's most important for the user. Now it's followed by the body of information. So after the headline, you can put supporting visualizations and provide more details to the headline. And at the end of the page, you can provide some details, some more list view of your data for more detailed information lookup. So by having this clear layout, your user will be really easy for your user to follow through this story that you put together for them. Well, let's take a look at one of the examples of the dashboard layout. Now, one other thing that you can put at the top of your dashboard is navigation and branding. This is what puts all your page together, right? You can have your dashboard name in there and any navigational links to other parts of a dashboard or more dashboards. Filters would be good to put on top of your page as well, just because they set the scope for the whole page, and it's really hard to miss them at the top. So it's a great place to have them. Now here we see the headline summary. So it's really a quick overview of the most important KPIs that the user needs to be looking at this dashboard, followed by the hero visualization that provides more details to those most important KPIs that I just showed. And next to it, you can put supporting visualization that will add more details to the key KPIs and hero visualization. And finally, last but not least, the details section provides this really specific details, and it gets filtered based on your selections and faceting that you're applying to charts or filters. Just gives you the right details that you're looking for. All right, now we figured out the layout, but how to scale this layout to fit all the information that we would like to present to the users. And I'll give you an example of a kitchen. Everybody has a kitchen. Now imagine you walk into a kitchen and every cabinet is open. Well, that experience will be overwhelming. It's gonna look crazy. You're gonna be so confused. So that's what happens when you try to present all information at once to your user, rather than using the kitchen cabinets and hiding the information inside until they really need it. And there's a few patterns to do it in the dashboards. Let's take a look. Well, this first pattern here shows you how your dashboard has a few sections that will have some high-level information, but until you really need to dig in deeper and see more details, it's hidden. But by clicking and expanding each section, you'll be able to get to the details real easy, and you're not overwhelmed in the first place. Or this example here, that's called an accordion. So very similar. Again, each section has some high-level KPIs overview, and you can click into each section and see more details. This pattern can work on desktop or mobile layout. Very versatile. It also adds this interactivity to your experience, makes this experience more delightful for your user. Or this pattern here, where you do have a lot of main content, but there's some additional details that you may want to pull out based on what it is you're doing. So for example, hiding a filter panel until your user needs to filter something would be a good example and what people do sometimes. So another example. We do have a video kind of showing this inspirational designs using these different patterns and even more patterns. So please, again, follow this link after the webinar and check it out. It's really cool, really inspiring. All right, now let's talk about CRAP. Well, CRAP is actually, I'm not cursing here. CRAP is an acronym for the key visual design principles. It's really important after figuring out all this layout and interactions to keep in mind the beauty part, right? First impressions do count, and the research shows that the experiences that look pretty are perceived as more easy to use and more professional. So let's get this CRAP done. So C in CRAP stands for contrast, and contrast may come in different forms and shapes. Like in this case, it's a color contrast. So I'm highlighting this area that I need my user to focus on with this color, dark color. Or this example here, contrast can come in a size, right? This top part is really big. So that's what drags my attention right away. R stands for repetition. So whenever you have a similar information type, just use repetitive patterns to display it. Like in this example, the details are shown in this cards design, which are really easy to scan through. Or in this example, for mobile, again, same pattern, everything displayed as a card. Alignment is really important to keep in mind when you're designing your page. Everything on your page needs to be aligned. It just makes it easier for a human eye to scan. If things will be scattered around, like in that first example in the beginning that I showed you, it'll be really hard for me to scan through and really follow the story here. So in this example here, there's a lot of different types of information. There's text, there's numbers, there's percentage change for my metrics, but because it's all aligned, it's really easy for me to scan and get through those sections of information easily. Finally, P stands for proximity. So things that belong together should stay together visually as well. Like in this case, there's a KPI that has a title, it has a percentage change. There's quite a few pieces of information here, but because they all brought close together, it's easy for me to distinguish those areas and understand that there's a logical connection there. Or like in this example here, like you can see this KPIs here on top is pretty complex information here. There's a number, there's a trend line, there's a lot going on. But because all these things are brought together and there's enough spacing in between the next section, it's really easy for me to scan and identify all the different areas. All right, now let's see how can we put it all in practice and take a look at how can we apply those principles into a single visualization. I will look at the page, but we really need to think about a single visualization as well. And let's think about information sent here. So what information sent is, it's a way to provide user with just enough information for them towards to follow your story. So let's play a little game here, and you can post your answers in chat. Who can count a circle? I'm sure everybody can. How much time it takes? Well, we'll see. Hopefully everybody got a chance to count the circles, but it wasn't really hard, but it wasn't super easy. You have to find and hunt for each circle to count it. Let's see if we can make it easier by applying those CRAP principles. Well, if we apply color contrast, is that easier now? Well, I hope so. It really looks easier to me now that I can clearly focus on what I need to be counting. Now we can make it even more easier when we apply spatial positioning and put all circles close to each other and together. Now it's even simpler for me to count. Now, what if I told you I could make it even more easy by adding marks, and I don't even need to count the circles now. I can just look at the last number and tell that there's 7 circles here. right? That was much easier. Now let's see how this actually works applied to an actual chart. All right, now here's the chart here that tells me about market share performance. It's not very clear for me right away what I need to be looking at, just because there's a lot of bars and they're all different color. I don't know what this color means. Now that I start reading labels, I can see that there's my company here. So clearly, I probably will be comparing my company to those 9 other companies. All right, but how do I do it? Like, it's not super simple. Now, could we make it easier? Of course, let's apply color for drawing attention. So now, if I would have seen this in the first place, it will be really clear to me right away that I need to be looking at my company and comparing to other companies. Now, it's still not really simple for me to compare it to other companies, just because it's somewhere in the middle. I need to really eyeball and see, is it bigger than other companies? My market share, is it less? Not very simple to do. We can make it easier by applying spatial positioning on, in this case, really just sorting our chart. Now I can clearly see that my company is number 3 out of other companies. But I can tell even richer story if I add benchmarking mark, right? So now that I added this average mark, I can clearly tell that my company is not just number 3, but it's actually doing really well because it's well above average and it's above a few other companies. So completely different story, right? All right, now that was a lot to take in. So how do you make sure that everybody on your team actually follows all those design principles and apply them to all the products that they're building? Well, we encourage you to think about design systems, and you may be always familiar with the design system while working on any Salesforce products, right? We do use a Salesforce Lightning design system. So that's how we document how our things need to be laid out and how everything needs to look like. So why don't you apply the same thing to all your analytics products and create the style guide for you? This will allow to really keep everyone on the same page, make sure your products are all consistent, and most importantly, it will create a set of reusable components that could be reused across the board and make the process of developing a dashboard faster. So one thing that we did here at the analytics design team, we created an app toolkit, which is a collection of business use cases. It's just documenting all most important, most popular use cases for dashboards. So for example, leaderboards or segmenting situations and showing which charts are best to use for each situation. There's a preview, the video below. You can check it out after the session. We also capture design best practices, all that I talked about with specific examples of charts and dashboards. And most importantly, it's ready to use because it's just a dashboard. And that's what's cool about it. And that's why I mentioned that you should consider doing this as well for your company, for your team. Just have a dashboard that you all can reuse and refer to when building new dashboards. Now there's a video that I mentioned. Please check it out. It just goes over the main parts of the app toolkit and safety harbor here. This is going to be available as a dashboard template in winter 22 release, so everybody will be able to access our design toolkit and customize it to your needs. All right, now that we know what we're building and how we're building it, it's really important to have a plan for gathering feedback on your product. And to get feedback, you just need to reach out to your users and test your prototype that you're building. There's a few techniques to test your prototype or even just your idea, right? Just sitting down with the user, asking them critical questions, right? Describing a situation that they're in, that they're trying to performing the task, and uncovering all the problems that they may have or the actions that they're taking so that it can help you understand what needs to be present in your product. You could do expectation tests for them to shed a line on their new needs and goals, to provide them a prototype, maybe not adding any labels to it, and seeing if they really understand that, what each section of your dashboard serves for. And finally, I think most important step is doing rapid iterative testing. So once you have a somewhat working prototype, maybe you use this app toolkit and some sample data, put something together real quick. So now you just need to schedule time with your user, sit down and watch them go through your product and succeed or maybe struggle. And then you maybe consider doing some changes to your design based on their feedback if you see that something's wrong. All right. Well, congratulations. We went through all the steps to become design heroes here. We just need a few things to remember. You always need to understand your audience to be a design hero. You need to have alignment or the critical business questions early on with your team before going into development process. You need to be ready to ideate quickly and often, have as much design studios as possible, generate as many ideas as possible, and keep ideating on improving your product when it's ready. And always think about designing for structure and organization, because otherwise you'll be in the situation with this user who's completely lost and is not willing to adopt your product. I know it's a lot to ask, but just keep in mind those design thinking process benefits, right? You will get reduced development costs. You'll spend hopefully less time developing a thing. You will get the productivity boost for your team. And finally, the team will be so excited. They'll be your champions. Will be great adoption of your product at the end of the day. Right now, I know it was a lot of information to take in this hour. So there's some more things that you can look into. First of all, get inspired even more. Check out our design lookbook. It's a collection of our latest and greatest design screens, as well as some forward-looking and futuristic designs for you to get excited. So please check it out. You can access it on desktop. I don't think the link works on mobile, so just to keep in mind. You can host your own design studio. There's a design playbook which goes into more details for each step that I just briefly went over. It really gives you a structure for your own design studio and kind of walks you through the process that you need to follow. There's also worksheets that you can use. There are links to download, so feel free to download and use it. And please continue your learning adventure. There's quite a few resources on Trailhead on analytics design. There's a learning map site that has all the help articles for Tableau CRM analytics. And finally, there's we just released a UX design certification. So now you can be officially certified as a Salesforce designer. So please check it out. It's really cool, very helpful, and goes in, again, much more details of what I just briefly touched on today. Finally, we really love hearing from you. So please consider signing up for our user research program. We do love hearing feedback, and you really have a strong influence on our future looking products or any improvements that we're planning to make. So we do listen to our users. Please join our user research program. And with that, I would like to thank you all for being here for this hour, and hope you all will be happy design heroes. And I'll hand it over to Manny.
So before we hand it over to Manny, I think we have time for one question, but there's been so many questions. We'll put them in Slack so you can follow up with the questions that come through. But what advice would you give a company that currently does not apply design thinking to their analytics development?
Yeah, so I would give a simple advice that's simple to give, but hard to actually follow it probably. But yeah, I will try inviting everybody into this process, right? Like I mentioned, it's a collaboration. So talk to people, invite people in this design thinking process. Start by this brainstorming sessions, right? Present them those benefits of design thinking early on, right? How much time you can spend by doing this design studio instead of just building something that you have no clue what kind of data sets, data flows you'll need, right? Don't be afraid to invite people and make them design heroes as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Elena. I'm sure everybody will agree that was a fantastic presentation. Looks like we've had lots of engagement in both the chat and the Slack. So once again, thank you, Elena. But also, I just want to thank everybody for your participation over the year. This is the last event of the year, so I just want to thank everybody for your engagement throughout the year. Those of you who have been attending right from the beginning, and even our new attendees as well. And stay tuned and look forward to many more of these upcoming in the new year. And with that, I'll just pass you back over to Zach.
Thank you everyone for joining for this latest Cup of Data. Make sure you take the survey when you close out the Zoom, and we look forward to seeing you next year.